This episode of the Get Fast podcast is brought to you by Trivelo Coaching, where we help triathletes and cyclists like you train smarter to race faster. You are joined, as always, by your host, former Australian Ironman Champion Gerard Donnelly, and I am Jordan Donnelly. In this episode, we're stripping things back and we're talking about a concept that is very simple, but we would say has one of the biggest impacts on your training and racing performance. We talk about a lot of semi-advanced stuff on here, some things more complicated than others, but we really want to talk about one of the most simple principles you need to think about in order to really train better, train smarter, and race faster. And most people overlook this principle, and you might hear it and think, no worries, like I understand that it is simple. I don't need to worry about that. Tell me more about power or data or anything else. But this number one rule, this number one principle, can be the difference in people really taking their performance to the next level over a period of 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, however long that they're training for. And it's something that you have to respect and you have to really pay attention to, and you have to be really honest with yourself about how well you're doing it. So before we get into what it is, just a reminder that if you want to download our Expert Secrets cheat sheet with the very best tips and advice all the expert guests on our podcast have said to help you train smarter and race faster, go to getfastpodcast.com. So, Dad, what is the number one principle? What is the number one rule that we need to be paying attention to?
There was an old saying that's probably not even relevant anymore, that cash is king. Consistency is king. That's my motto. Consistency is king. If you dabble with inconsistency, you are going to get a different outcome. Rider A, rider B, one doing the same program as the other. The consistent person will outperform on race day the inconsistent person, no matter what the talent is. And that, to me, is one of the really most basic things that I try to get across to each athlete.
So before you roll your eyes and think, consistency, it's just another, it's a very easy principle. I'm pretty consistent. How big a problem is consistency, do you think, when you look at athletes?
I'd say it's pretty massive. There's so many factors that contribute to inconsistency, and some of them are out of your control, but the majority of them are in your control. And we always say control the controllables, and that's one thing you have control over is your own consistency. No matter how good structured program you have, if you don't give it the consistency factor, it will be an inadequate program.
So let's be really clear here. What does it take to be getting consistency right? What do you define as this athlete is doing well enough in the consistency factor?
Well, as you know, we have very specific sessions based around whether you're a cyclist or a triathlete or a trail runner or a swimmer. There are key things that you can't really afford to do a lot of inconsistent training with. And those concepts are really important, that at the end of the day, when you get to the race day, you look back and you say, well, I was inconsistent with a couple of things, but the key things I was not inconsistent with. And that would be something that I would really pursue with vigorous determination, that I would try to get every single session that's put in front of me done, completed, no matter how bad I feel, or, there's obviously asterisks to that injury and sickness, but to maintain a consistency and to stop yourself from getting injured or sick is also part of the process, because that's something that will sabotage your own consistency. Illness is generally attributed to training too hard, or that you're in an area where maybe you're a teacher and you're with kids, or you're
at hospital.
Yeah, situations where there are sick people around you, and you have a family with kids who go to school. So you're most vulnerable because you're actually training on the edge. And it's really fascinating to see how quickly a great training program can be derailed by an illness. So you have to really be careful about what's happening around you and your planning. And therefore, it's just not consistency on its own. There's so many other aspects of consistency that contribute to consistency. And planning is one of those things.
So talk to me about planning then, and what you see as mistakes people make with planning that end up resulting in a inconsistent week.
And, don't get me wrong, I'm in the same position. Things crop up in your daily world, daily life. But at the start of the week, you've got some idea in your diary of what is happening outside of training with your work and family. And if you know that on a Wednesday night or a Thursday night there is a parent-teacher night, or there's a staff meeting, or you have to be at school early for something, or you have to be at work early, you have to catch an early train because there's a Zoom video meeting, whatever the reason, know that day in the morning I can't train. So it has to be that night. So you need to have your focus totally on, when I get home, that's what I'm going to do. That's my number one focus. So planning around the things that could sabotage your consistency is that important. I can't stress it enough. And the examples I have of athletes who will tell me I couldn't train Wednesday morning, and I got home too late Wednesday night, so I missed the session. Well, if you knew that there was something happening Wednesday morning, then obviously you plan around doing it Wednesday night. And to me, that's just common sense. But that is one thing that the athletes sometimes, whether they're using it as excuses because they're tired, but at the end of the day, you've got to get to the start line in the best shape possible, and by deliberately not planning, you're just going to be getting there at 80% or 50%, depending on how inconsistent you are.
So at what point would you say to an athlete, this is a lack of planning and you're using it as an excuse, compared to valid reasons and excuses that do happen in life? There you go. That's kind of out of my control.
Yeah, something that crops up on the day, I'm pretty lenient with. It's happened to me. It's just so many things have conspired that I just can't get to the session, and that's okay. If that happens regularly, it's actually not okay, because you're not well planned, clearly. If things crop up on the day all the time, then you need to actually think about your scheduling to prevent that from happening. They're just roadblocks. And in the scheme of a 20 or 30 week program or a 50 week program, 2 or 3 sessions here or there each month, it's really insignificant. But if you start to get 25% of your sessions missed, or 30%, or, dare I say 50%, that's an alarming proposition that will really inhibit your performance come race day.
We have a rule in our program, don't we, which is results or reasons.
Yes.
And
yep, that's perfect. A perfect topic to talk about. There's people who love to enter an event in the coffee shop or in the bar, but they actually are not in love with the process, and therefore they're going to be a reasons person, not a results person. So their job is to try and turn that round, and that's not easy to do when you're a good talker but not such a good walker, as we say. Talk the talk, walk the walk. And that is such an easy thing to let occur if you're not actually concentrating on planning to enable yourself to be as consistent as possible. So, I'm always telling people, one session at a time. Look ahead, but don't look too far ahead. It's like when you get to the marathon and the triathlon, don't think that there's 42 Ks to go. Think about what am I going to do in the next K? What pace can I hold for this K? When I get to that 1K, then I'm thinking about the next K. So really, as I said earlier, the planning aspect of it really is one of the more controlling things about how the outcome of consistency can be achieved.
And the funny thing about results versus reasons, and why we put it as a rule in our program, is that on race day, the results on race day don't care about your reasons. They don't care about your excuses.
Yep, and the minute I speak to athlete A, B, C, D, E, everybody's got a story to tell, which is fantastic, and we can categorise them into the results person or the reasons person. And the reasons person will have a long-winded story about, I could have, should have, would have, if I had have. The results person, that was the best day I've ever had. I'm so happy. I achieved everything I wanted to. My training was great. I was consistent. And the correlation between the consistent person with reasons and the inconsistent person, consistent person with results and the inconsistent person with reasons, that is just a normal triathlon response that I have.
So actually break down for me, I want to know from your perspective what the standards are that you would expect of yourself in terms of consistency, that you would expect of athletes who have high expectations of results. And when I say what standards, what are the standards? What do you see as acceptable in terms of consistency? Is 100% of the sessions what you're looking for? Not missing a session? Is missing 1 or 2 sessions okay? Because where do you draw that line?
The goals are always to be perfection. That's the goal. And we know that that's not possible. We absolutely know that cannot be achieved. I'm yet to coach anybody, including myself, that has had a program from start to finish where there something hasn't gone wrong. So, but that's our goal. It's just like, you set a goal that might be fractionally higher than you can achieve in the race, but, you're not going to set a mediocre goal. You're going to set the thing that's going to push you to the highest level of training. So definitely I think that we try to achieve 100%, but as I said, it's a percentage game, and if you can keep it to 10% of inconsistency, then I think you're in the elite category. Once you get outside that 10% of inconsistent training, then your results are compromised the minute you step outside that. And obviously, if you're in the middle of a 4-week period and you've missed, 25%, that's a point where I'm going, what's going on? Is there something wrong? What's causing this derailing of your consistency? And spread that out over 20 weeks, and 25% in 4 weeks compared to the inconsistency over 20 weeks is back to 10%. So, and it also depends on what sessions you're missing. In an Ironman and a half Ironman and an endurance bike ride or an endurance trail run marathon, endurance swim, if you don't execute all of the endurance training, then come race day, you're totally underprepared. Your fitness levels are determined by how much endurance training you can get into your body. You can train as hard as you like for short intensity sessions, but if you don't complement that with the endurance ride, then at the end of the day, you're going to be underdone. And so knowing the sessions that can't be compromised on, and understanding what to do about those sessions if you've genuinely got no time for a particular session, that is another skill in itself, is to manipulate your program so that you don't sabotage the next couple of weeks because you tried to lump all the sessions that you missed back into another day or 2 days.
I do want to ask more questions on that topic, but before we go into that, if you break down a triathlon program, an Ironman or 70.3 program, there is probably around 10, give or take a couple of sessions. If you count, a bike session into a brick run, into a run off the bike as 2 sessions, could be 12 or 14 sessions in a week. So if you're missing 10%, that's 1 in every 10. You're missing at least 1 session a week. So is that going to be acceptable for you?
Yeah, definitely. If you count it up, let's just look at run off the bike. Say we're doing 3 consistently running off the bike and we miss 1. And we do that and we miss 1 every, 6 times out of 20. Well, those runs off the bike, they're not going to have the same impact as missing 6 endurance runs. The Saturday ride, missing 3 of those as compared to missing 3 midweek rides, it's not going to have the same impact. Missing the endurance ride is going to be more detrimental to your program. So it's understanding every training session is important in the overall picture, and your goal is to be consistent to do everything, but knowing the importance of specific sessions helps you make better decisions and enables you to almost sneakily keep the consistency going with some inconsistent days.
Not everyone would be aware of that, though, that some sessions hold much higher weight than others, and that, you know, they might think I'm only missing one session a week, but it is the most important run session of the week, and they don't realise that missing that is so detrimental to their running training.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And if you look at some programs, and the Training Peaks programs that we use have the traffic light, green, yellow, orange and red. And if you looked at a program and saw all greens and then an occasional yellow or occasional red, you would go, wow, just from a visual, that person is consistent.
So to be clear, green means you completed the session,
Yes.
according to Training Peaks. Yellow or orange mean you either went over or under the time it was supposed to go for, and red means you didn't complete anything.
That's right. So just from a glimpse, it could be that the red happened 4 times over a period of 4 weeks. It happened to be all 4 endurance sessions, or one was endurance run, one was endurance ride, then another endurance run, then another endurance ride. But the rest of the program looks great. If the person missed one run off the bike and another run off the bike, or missed one of the midweek rides, that would be far less damaging to your program than having those reds in the endurance day.
So even though you're looking at 2 programs that have the same amount of missed sessions, one is significantly worse than the other.
Absolutely. And understanding that aspect of your program really, you know, and as we say all the time, the more information you have as an athlete about what you're doing, the better decisions you can make. And that's why we talked about planning at the start of this, is because, you know, okay, what's my goal this week? It's a recovery week. What's my goal this week? It's week 2 of an intense block. What's my goal this week? Understanding what the purpose of the actual week, and then, okay, what sessions do I have this week? Going in and looking at them and finding out, oh, okay, I'm doing strength on the bike, I'm doing hill repeats running, understanding that that's what the expectation is this week. So already you've framed your mindset around, I know what I'm doing this week. I know when I'm doing it. I'm doing it in the morning, or I'm doing it in the afternoon, or I'm doing it at lunchtime. So all these pieces of information that you've pre-planned by looking ahead at what the program's expectation are for each week. And of course, if you get to a point where you're feeling quite fatigued, then, you know, the recovery week can't come quick enough. And it's not a time to stop training. It's a time to reduce the intensity. And that will help with the consistency all the time. And you know, trusting the program helps with consistency, and it's something that we need to talk about when you want to bring that up. But that is something that's really the next phase is you've got your great program, you're trying to be consistent, you understand what the outcome that you're trying to achieve each week, each session is, you're planning ahead, and then that's the next point.
I do want to touch on that. You are right, but I have to say I am a little bit surprised, knowing your personality, that with your coach's hat on, how lenient you seem to be on the consistency factor. I know that your own personal standards for yourself wouldn't be that lenient, and you must have a coach's hat on that is a little bit more lenient to other people's lives. But when you said even up to 10%, I was surprised that was your answer, because you really do demand a lot from yourself. And this was really evident last year at the Nationals campaign that you set for yourself. And before, you said, I don't think I've ever done 100% of a program. But I think last year, correct me if I'm wrong, you set a goal 16 weeks out to win the Nationals, and you were really not in form. You were a long way back. You'd had a period of inconsistency yourself, and you wanted to have a really consistent training program. And for 16 weeks, I don't think you missed a session. Is that correct?
No, I didn't miss a session, but it's something we didn't talk about earlier. Even though it shows green on my program, there would be sessions that I didn't achieve the full outcome. I can vividly remember trying to do some strength efforts on one Wednesday, and I physically couldn't pedal the bike anymore doing those strength efforts. And I still rode the 3 hours that was required. I still had 1,800 metres of climbing, but I just couldn't do the 3 repeat strength efforts. And so that's actually still being consistent, but doing the session, but dumbing it down a little bit so that you can still get the time in, you're still getting some fitness benefits, but you're actually not hitting the target that's set. And that is one of the things that I'm always advocating to people. Something is better than nothing. And just saying, oh, I'm too tired, well, that, think about it a bit more than, I'm too tired for what? I'm too tired for a high intensity session. Well, if I am too tired for a high intensity session, drop it down to make it a session that's not high intensity, that you can actually still maintain some sort of level of fitness, because you don't want your graph to be doing this. You want your graph to be steadily climbing and then recover, steadily climbing, recover. And if you're doing really well at some sessions and getting some really good fitness gains, and because you train too hard in that, you actually have to have days off, then your fitness drops. And we're not getting that staircase effect. We're getting like a wave effect where you are fit there, then you lose some fitness and you get to there, which you've only gained that much, then you lose a bit more and you get to there, and you're slowly getting some fitness. But the staircase effect is you get to there, then you go straight up to the next ramp and the next ramp. And where you were in week 1 compared to where you were in week 20 is incredibly different. You might have started with a fitness number of 50 and ended up at 120. And the person who's doing the inconsistency might start at 50 as well. He might end up at 75. And, that's a great example of how fitness at race day can be so different just by being inconsistent. But the point I'm making is there are sessions that I did do that weren't as hitting the target as I wanted to, but definitely there were no misses.
So I guess in that analogy, the staircase is, it's 2 steps up and then just holding the position. Whereas
recover, get rid of fatigue, and then step up again. But absorb the fitness that you've gained.
Yeah. The wave scenario is 2 steps up, 1 step back, 2 steps up, 1 step back, and it's just going to be a lot slower.
Yeah, and it can be for any reason. It can be that you've trained too hard, or that things have got in the way, or you got sick, or you got injured. And regardless, it's always a reason, isn't it? And the other person's going to have the result. There's no doubt about it. And that's the point of this whole conversation today, is we are here to get the result that you want on race day. And what are the things that are going to help you along that journey? Well, consistency is one of those things that people just dismiss so easily. I'm training well, I'm doing okay. Well, let's actually look at your calendar and let's count how many days are yellow, red or orange. And let's count how many that are green. And then once we count how many are green, let's go into some of those sessions and see if you actually achieved the green, because green is really based on time. It's not based on whether you actually hit the targets or not. So that's another aspect of, it says on my calendar they're all green, but let's just go in and have a look and see, like I explained my session where I couldn't do the strength efforts, still shows green, but I know that session wasn't done the way it should have been. So there's so many ways you can measure how your consistency is going. And once I've set that mindset that this is my campaign from here to there, and I am so determined that nothing is going to get in my way, and there are lots of things happening in my life and your life that can derail it. But with really good planning and structure, I can get around all those obstacles and still get the outcome. And you know that I've got up at 4:30 some mornings to actually fit that in because I couldn't fit it in during the day, or I've been on the ergo at 9:30 at night trying to finish off a session.
That determination and mindset is probably one of the last factors in what you're saying. It takes planning and preparation and a program to stick to and knowing what you're doing, but then it's the determination to follow through and say that no matter what comes up this week, I'm going to fit it in.
Yeah, and if your mindset's based around, I've got to be as consistent as I can, because on race day, I know that if I look back into the campaign that I've had, it's such an enjoyable experience just before you start going, I'm so satisfied with what I've just done. And if someone beats me or I don't achieve, it's not through want of trying. I've done everything possible to get the outcome that I deserve. And at the end of the day, there would be very few people who don't get that outcome if they've if they've been consistent from start to finish, and they've had a mindset where, you know, I'm thinking about, oh, what just happened this week, and I see all sorts of data that I'm improving with. My power's going up, you know, my run times might be improving slightly, my swim times are holding steady. You know, I'm really gleaning the information to make sure that I'm just not ticking the sessions off like a box. I'm actually, maybe I only did, next week I need to do more power on that. And I know I can do it because by the time I got to the last one, I realised I could. And I had, you know, 6 of those 5-minute efforts, and I was too easy on the first 2. So next week my challenge is to try and hold 300 watts across all of those 6 5-minute efforts.
That self-awareness and self-accountability is a whole nother topic and a whole nother thing to think about, because you yourself have that ability to say, well, no, just getting the greens isn't enough. I want to get the greens knowing that I did the sessions properly, and only you can know that. Only you know if you did them properly or not, because someone else will look at your calendar, and unless they're the coach like you and going in and looking at the details, they're not going to see that. And thinking about that and thinking about that Nationals campaign last year, you and one of our Trivelo athletes, Joe, both had an equally consistent period. I think that's what stood out to me, is that I don't think he missed a session either.
No, he was spot on. And I remember the day that I left early for those strength efforts, he stayed and did them. So not only did he get the consistency, he achieved almost daily the outcomes that was required. So yeah, there's good examples of how that can happen, and there were plenty of other people who went to that campaign who absolutely were consistent, and you know, they performed fantastic on the day, better than they had ever performed before, but they didn't get a result in the race, and that can be, you know, something that happens because the competition might be above your level.
But that's a podium result,
That's right.
It's if you've given everything, whether you get first or 10th, if you've gone as hard as you can.
That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about getting the outcome that you're, you know, and for me, if I come 15th and I've done a PB, I'm happy with that. There's guys who are better than me. I'm driven by podiums, there's no doubt about that, and success. But, you know, there'll be definitely somebody who's always better than you at some stage in your career. It just so happens that, you know, as a triathlete, most of the triathlons that people are competing in, it's against themselves. And there's a small percentage, like the pros and the age group winners, who are definitely competing against others, and you're still competing against yourself to improve your performance. But absolutely concentrating on all the detail about your program really contributes to a mindset that's going to enable you to be more consistent, because, you know, you almost feel like some sort of chemical release. Oh, geez, I'm on a roll here. I've done, you know, 6 weeks where I haven't missed a session, and I'm checking all my data, and I'm really going well, and that enhances the consistency topic. And above all else, in everything that we do as a coaching group, rider A or triathlete B, the person who's more consistent, not necessarily at the top of their range in every single session, is going to outperform rider B, whose inconsistency is his, you know, Achilles heel.
In terms of that self-accountability, I mean, you and Joe were proof of that. You both, not that it's not about this, but you both did take home the gold at the Nationals, and that was so rewarding for the effort. And I think there was a few people, Trivelo athletes and non-Trivelo athletes, asking, you know, what did Joe do differently? What did he change to suddenly just skyrocket? And it wasn't sudden to you, but it was sudden to everyone else. And it comes back to, when you really look at your program, being honest with yourself, and only you can answer this, is how consistent have you been for an extended period? Because we often exaggerate to ourselves how well we're actually doing, but if we looked back at everything, we might just be more inconsistent than we actually think.
Yeah, and that's a bit, you know, putting yourself on the line a bit, and that's what you should be doing. You should be questioning everything you're doing. Joe's consistency was outstanding, there's no doubt about that, and there were other people who were as well. But doing the program the way it was written was also outstanding, and not a version of it. And Joe had done that for years, a version. And I think that was his biggest mindset change was, I'm going to do everything that's said here. And there were days where I was giving him early morning, easy 30-minute recovery rides at 100 watts, 100 RPM, 100 heart rate, and then his main session in the afternoon. And, not a question mark. Yep, I'm doing that twice a day. And there would be other people who I'd give that to who would be going, have you made a mistake? I've got 2 sessions today. But that's the difference in mindset of what's the reason for this? The reason is so that I can recover just with an easy pedal so that I can do the session better in the afternoon.
The funny thing is, whenever we talk about a Trivelo athlete on the podcast, people always come back and say, I know you were talking about me on the podcast. And that's funny because it is kind of a universal thing. It's not one person that does this. It's something that you see quite often.
Yeah, and the examples we're trying to give to people in the podcast is real life situations that happen so that you can think through those things to get yourself to race day. And look, I keep saying the same thing over and over again. The purpose of what we're trying to do here is to help you get to your race day and achieve your outcome. And whatever it takes along that journey, us giving you this information about consistency, if it hasn't been drummed into you now, it never will be. And is it okay if I don't do that session? Well, I'll ask you that question. Is it okay? You tell me. And if you be honest with yourself, of course you know it's not okay. It's not fulfilling the program. So not sure why you asked me that question, because you know what the answer is going to be, unless it's something that's totally out of your control. But we can still manage to adapt the program to actually make the outcome of a missed session not so dramatic to race day.
And this circles right back to the point we made 5 or 10 minutes ago about trusting the program and trusting the process. And a well-written program will allow you to be consistent. A well-written program will allow you to do what you said. And when there's a session, if you can't hit the exact numbers, you can still hit the lower end of the range. And if you are feeling fatigued, there's ways to manage the program and not just be killing yourself every session where it's just too much high intensity, not enough recovery.
You have to take ownership as well in this program. So doing a version of it is taking ownership the wrong way. Doing the program as it's written and then you saying to yourself, I'm really struggling today in this run. I can't run 4:50 pace. I feel heavy legs. But I know Gerard will want me to do this, but I can do it at 5:15 pace or 5:20 and still get the 50 minutes in. That's a great outcome from potentially a missed session. So you take responsibility yourself, understanding your body, and that decision you made could stop you from getting sick because you run down, which will, of course, create inconsistencies. So the minute you miss 5-6 days of sickness, it's basically 5-6 days of easy training before you can start the program again. In effect, 5 days becomes 10 days. 4 days off becomes 8 days. 2 days off becomes 4 days. So that's actually how the program works when you miss sessions because of illness or injury. If you miss sessions because of poor management, you don't take the equivalent days off, you just resume the program. Execution of your program, not only on race day, execution of your event, execution of your program contributes to the consistency or non-consistency that we're talking about.
So to finish off, what do I do if I am honest with myself and I acknowledge that I am an inconsistent athlete, that if I'm being inconsistent, and whether that's not as consistent throughout the week or I am having extended periods without consistency, what do you do as a coach to intervene?
Well, people have always said that, people never change their colours. Well, I think if you're motivated enough to get a different outcome that you never got before, then I think people can change. But you can't change unless you understand what things you're doing wrong. And planning for consistency is probably the key factor that people do wrong. They don't think ahead about what's in their schedule for a week or a month or whatever. We've got examples of people who have said, I want to do an Ironman in 20 weeks, and in the middle they've got a 3-week period or a 2-week or a 1 week or a weekend where they've got no facility to train. No swim, no bike, no run. Well, I'd have to question whether, doing the Ironman is the number one thing that you're trying to achieve here, because you know that you've got this event happening in the middle of that program that could take you out for 2 weeks. So you're already compromising your program because of that planning. So, you've got to think really clearly about when you select a goal, can you maintain the consistency that you need to get the outcome on the day? And if you can't, you have to consider not doing that event. So that's a really good example of how people will just turn a blind eye. I still want to do the event. And if you were sick for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or injured, my question next would be, are you going to be happy with an inferior result because of this injury or illness? And if the person's honest with themselves, and I've done this myself, had some illness, gone to an event and performed really poorly, and asked myself, why did I compete when I knew the outcome was going to be compromised because of what I'd experienced in the program, in the campaign? And if you're going to say to me you're happy with that, that's fine. But you can't be bitter and twisted at the end of the day and doom and gloom at the end of your race when you haven't achieved what you wanted to.
And it's the same thing with if it's a conscious choice, like you just said, to go on holidays or take some time off training in your training preparation. You just can't expect as good a result on race day.
Yeah, and that's the simple outcome, result or reason. I didn't do as well as I could have because of this. Well, but that's you've created that reason, and you didn't get the result. So we do use that analogy a lot, results and reasons, and if it doesn't worry you that much, then fine, that's okay. But the majority of people who are listening to this are looking for the winning edge, and we're spelling it out quite clearly. And there are lots of things that contribute to consistency or inconsistency, and that's what the point of this discussion is.
And there's a lot more we can talk about with consistency, and it's funny, it's such a simple concept, and we've spoken for 40 minutes or so on it already, and we could probably talk for another hour and a half on consistency because it's such a valuable principle. And I mean, we haven't touched on more on managing your fatigue levels and understanding your own training, and like you said, the art of adapting the sessions based on how you're going, and also the important part of consistent testing, the importance of consistent blocks and periods within the training program itself. That's all kind of just more advanced stuff, but we'll just leave it on the principle of what you said at the start: consistency is king, right?
Fantastic.
Yeah, so that's it for this episode. If you want to get our expert secrets cheat sheet to download the best tips and advice all the experts on our podcast have said to help you train smarter and race faster, go to getfastpodcast.com. If you go there as well and enter your email address, we send weekly emails, and that's the best way to have a chance to get on our Trivelo program as well. Just go to getfastpodcast.com. That's it for today. We'll see you next time.